Let us begin by reading the word problem. At halftime, Team A was 15 points behind Team B. By the end of the game, Team A outscored its opponent and won the game by 7 points. How many points did Team A outscore its opponent by in the second half? So let us start off our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. So first thing we want to identify is the question that's being asked. In this problem, the question is, how many points did Team A outscore its opponent by in the second half? So that's a question being asked, so that's a question we want to answer. Since we know it is what we want to actually find now, let us go ahead and jump to step 2 and assign a variable. So since the question was, how many points did Team A outscore its opponent by in the second half, we're going to let our variable x, and again any variable will work, we're going to let x represent the amount of points that Team A outscored its opponent by in the second half. So again, our assigning of a variable, it's ideally the question, only that it's reworded in the form of a statement. So there we go, that's step 2. Now let us go back to us analyzing the problem. So let's see, what else do we know? We know that at halftime, Team A was 15 points behind Team B. Now the key here is the word behind. So since you're behind, or you have ideally less points, that's going to be an indicator of subtraction. So I'll make a note of that. Behind means subtraction. And now we also know that by the end of the game, Team A outscored its opponent and won the game by 7 points. So there's no keywords here, but we kind of have to think about what's being said. They won the game by 7 points. So since we know that Team A outscored its opponent, we know that they scored more points than Team B. So if you scored more points, that means you have a positive value to associate with the 7. So here we go. I think we have enough information to actually go ahead and create our equation. So let's see. So let's talk about the first half. In the first half, there were 15 points behind Team B. So 15 points behind, the word behind is associated with negative, and we'll have the 15. So that's going to give us a negative 15. And what we want to do is we want to add to that the number of points that Team A scored in the second half. So again, the negative 15 is in the first half, and we want to add to that what they scored in the second half. Well, we don't know that actual number, but we do know it's represented by the variable x. And then we know that whatever amount of points they outscored the team by, that put them up to 7 points in which they won the game by. And again, it's going to be a positive 7 since, in order to outscore your opponent, you need a positive 7 more points than your opponent. So there we go. There's our equation. Now let us go ahead and solve the equation. So the first step when solving the equation is to bring down the original equation found in step 3. So it's going to be our original equation. And again, when solving, you want to get the x variable completely by itself. So the problem right now is that we're adding a negative 15 to x. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of this negative 15. The only way to do so is by adding a positive 15. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up adding a positive 15 to both sides of the equation. Not just one, because that would throw off our equality, but we have to do it to both. So we'll have a plus 15 on the left, and we'll have a plus 15 on the right. So on the left-hand side, the negative 15 and the positive 15 simplify out, and we're left with simply x. And on the right-hand side, all we need to do is simplify 7 plus 15. So we'll do that off to the side of scratch work. 15 plus 7. So we'll do 5 plus 7. That's going to give us a 12. So we'll bring down the 2 and make a note to add a 1. So we're going to have 1 plus 1. That's going to give us a 2. So 15 plus 7 is 22. And I'm going to go ahead and color code that in green. So there we go. X is equal to 22. So what we want to do now is state our conclusion. So let us go ahead and state our conclusion clearly. Keep in mind that the question was, how many points did Team A outscore its opponent by in the second half? So then let us go ahead and state the following. There we go. So then Team A outscored its opponent by 22 points in the second half. And one of the things that I want to mention is that when you outscore your opponent by 22 points, that doesn't necessarily mean that they made 22 points in the second half. So here's an example. So suppose, for example, we'll have a column, Team A and Team B. And this is all about the second half. So suppose Team B scored 20 points in the second half. Then Team A outscored them by 22 points, so that means they made 42 points in the second half. If Team B only made 12 points in the second half, then since Team A outscored them by 22 points, that would mean they made 34 points in the second half. And if Team B, say for example, only made 6 points in the second half, then that means Team A made 22 more than that, so that's going to put us at 28. So again, 22 points outscoring doesn't mean that Team A made 22 points in the second half. It means that Team A made 22 points more than the amount of points Team B made. So now let us go ahead and check the result. So again, when checking the result, you want to start off with the original equation found in step 3. So we'll have negative 15 plus x is equal to 7. However, we know the numerical value of x. We know x is equal to 22. So we'll go ahead and substitute that in. And we're still going to have a 7 on the right. So all we need to do here is simplify the negative 15 plus the 22. And that's because 7 is already simplified on the right hand side. So what we want to do is we want to note that we have a negative 15 and a positive 22. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the absolute value of both and subtract the bigger from the smaller. So here we go. So we're going to have the absolute value of 22 is equal to 22. And we have the absolute value of negative 15 is equal to 15. So of these two, the 22 is bigger. So we're going to go ahead and do the 22 above and the 15 below. And we're going to subtract the 2. So we'll do 2 minus 5. We can't do that since 2 is less than 5. So we borrow from the 2, which becomes a 1. And now our 2 becomes a 12. So now we're going to do 12 minus 5, which gives us 7. And then we end up with 1 minus 1, which gives us 0. So all we have left is a 7. Now what we want to do is determine the sign. Since the 22 was the top number, and that top number was positive, that sign is going to give us a positive 7. So there we go. We end up with negative 15 plus 22 is equal to 7. So we always ask ourselves, is the left side equal to the right hand side? In this case, 7 is equal to 7, so our solution is correct.